Here I'm going to show you how to craft iron tools and iron weapons in Aska and the various different steps you need to do that, because first of all you're going to need to find some iron ore, then you're going to need to make it into iron bloom, then you're going to need to process that bloom and then craft it into the metal parts. So there are various different things that you need and various different steps that you're going to need to follow along the way. There are also mistakes that you can make that can ruin the process or can slow you down and can cause issues. So I want to talk to you about what those are and how to avoid them, how to get iron ore, how to process it, how to get more of it, and other things. So stick with me to find out all about that and all the different things you need to know. The first thing you need to do is to find an unexplored cave. I'd highly recommend doing this initially in the game before you even set up your base. Go around the map, find an unexplored cave, set up your base in a flat area nearby. This will make getting iron ore and processing it into weapons a lot easier later on. So if you can do that early, it's really good and an excellent way of doing it. Then you just need to find the unexplored cave, which will still get revealed here. Press B to open up the build menu and put a mine on it so that you can access the inside of it. You can then assign villagers to work in there or go in there yourself and harvest iron ore from the iron deposits. Obviously, you'll need a pickaxe in order to be able to do this, but if you keep bashing at these rocks, eventually they'll drop a bunch of iron ore deposits on the ground, and then you can pick those up. You can also do this by blowing up walls, and I'll show you how to do this later on. So you can blow up some walls, and then you can mine the walls, and then you'll get iron ore out of that as well, so that's another way of doing it. Also, make sure you build a load of torches, because you can put them in the pillars in the cave, and that will help your workers when they go in there, when they're looking to build things. So in order to do this process, you're going to need a pyre, and in the pyre you put a bunch of firewood, which will then turn into coal. Then you take the coal and your iron ore over to the bloomery and put some iron ore into the furnace. Now what you want to do is to basically have a lot of coal and a little bit of iron ore in the furnace. And this is my first and most important tip for you. What you'll find if you try and put too much iron ore in here is it won't work. You need a ratio of a lot more coal to iron ore. And so I'd recommend about 5 iron ore. Then press and hold E to ignite the furnace to get it going. You can access the furnace storage by pressing T on that before you start that process to basically interact with it and put your coal and iron ore in there. And then you need to go and interact with the bellows. Now, in order to use the bellows, you have to press E, but don't tap it. We press it all the way in, then release to let the air in, then push it back again. Basically treat it like you would bellows in real life. You've got to let the air get in there and then blow through, so it's sort of a slow process. The goal here is to get the temperature of the furnace between the 2 white lines on the temperature gauge and try and hold it there. Don't go above or below that process, and then eventually the iron ore will turn into blooms. It is possible to get villagers to do this instead if you prefer, so what you need to do is to go to your bloomery, and I'd recommend trying to build an improved bloomery because it'll make it easier and optimize things. But you can go here and you can assign a villager to it and then set them to some tasks in order to do the crafting. What I found was in my tasks it was set so that there was trying to use far too much iron ore and not enough coal. And this caused problems because the bots then couldn't make the iron blooms because the furnace wouldn't get hot enough. So what you need to do is to make sure that this setting is right. Set it to 5 iron ore or metal scraps versus the coal, and then let it run like that as their task. It is possible later on to put more iron ore in there, but what you'll find is if you try and do it too early, like put loads in as I have here, that your coal ratio will mean that you can't get it to the right temperature. It's too hard to get it into the perfect temperature zone, and then you just run out of coal before you even manage to produce any iron blooms, and all you've done is waste materials while doing so. You can also do this the other way. If you try and get it too hot, you'll find that one of the iron blooms just turns into a slag and then is therefore unusable and useless to you. So you do need to make sure you get it into those 2 white markers on the temperature gauge and keep it there. Don't go over because that'll spoil some of it for you, which is obviously not ideal. So once that's done, you can then extinguish the furnace and then put the bloom onto the anvil here, and then you just need to hit it with a hammer. You can use any sort of hammer here, but what you'll see is there's options to rotate right and rotate forward with R and T. What you need to do here is to bash the external crust off the bloom once it's come out of the furnace, so just keep hitting it with a hammer. You'll find that the sound changes as you hit it. So once it goes to a ting, ting, ting sort of sound to it, a higher pitch sound, that means you've cleaned that side off and you can then rotate it to the next side. So you'll see you just have to keep hitting it. Basically, we're trying to get all the black off of it. Now, you can do it on your own, or you can do it with a friend, or obviously the villagers will do it eventually if you set them the task to craft these things in here. It does take some time because you have to do every side. And unlike other bits of crafting, you're not just rotating it right, you also have to rotate it forward. So you have to go through all the different directions to get it finished. But eventually you'll find it will then turn into the blooms, and you'll get multiple blooms from this one thing that you're bashing on there. Once you've done that, you then need to take the blooms over to your workshop and to your metalworks. Make sure you've got a hammer for this next stage as well. If you break your hammer at any point, you'll need to get another one. We're looking for the forge here. The forge also requires coal, so make sure you've got some more coal on you. You're basically looking to put coal into that and then heat the forge up. And then what you need to do is you need to deposit your blooms in there, because you need heated blooms in order to craft them. So you put the blooms as they are into the forge, and then you have to wait for them to get hot. You'll see there's a little indicator bar on the bottom of them showing that they're heating up, and you have to wait some time for this in order for this to happen, and it takes a lot of time in order to do that, and then eventually they'll turn a different color and you'll see that it's now a hot iron bloom. Now when you go to the anvil, you can interact with that and select the thing that you're trying to craft, so it's the blade or the axe head, for example. But you'll notice that you need a specific number of iron blooms in order to do this. So hopefully you've got a bunch in the storage on the right hand side of this building, and you can put extra into the forge. You should find that the villagers will put them in there if they've got tasks to do so. And then once this is done, you'll then be able to craft an axe head as an example. So then put some axe head onto there, and then you have to repeat the same sort of process we just did with the blooms. So essentially you have to just keep rotating it right and bashing it clean, and then you put it in the quenching trough, and then you take it out of the quenching trough and you take it to the crafting table, and from there you can then craft your axe, assuming that you have the other ingredients necessary for this. So you can see that there are a lot of different steps in order to do this. Obviously you can assign villagers to craft these materials as well. Once iron ore in the cave starts to get low, you can go to your workshop, and then you can go down over here and you can make an exploding sack. Now this requires a Jotun stone, and it also requires a crawler sack, which I'll show you how to get in a second. But then you can take it into the cave, and you can find these walls in the cave here a bit further in that you can then use this to blow up. You have to obviously stand back for this. But what it will do is it will cause a cave-in in the cave here. And then once that cave-in's happened, you'll then find there's a bunch more walls, so multiple walls, that you can then knock down and get more iron from. So you'll be able to get more iron ore from this. So you'll find there's then cave walls in here. So this is a good way of basically regenerating the iron ore in the cave when it starts to run out, because you will find it runs out eventually, which is an issue. In order to get the crawler sacks, you first need to defeat the crawler and the little crawlers in there, and then you'll find that there's eggs inside the mine, and if you harvest them, some of those eggs will then drop the crawler sacks from them. So occasionally it seems to be a bit random and doesn't happen with every egg, but basically you destroy the eggs and harvest the creatures, and then you'll get crawler sacks that you can use for the bombs. I'd also recommend building a metal parts collector, because eventually you'll find in the storage of this that randomly you'll find metal parts have just been put in it, and you can use those for crafting. So this is good if you're running low on iron sources. Also search enemy corpses for metal scraps, and those can be used in place of iron ore as well, and then you can use those for crafting too.